Adam EposVox here, and I don't normally do this kind of thing, but today I'm making kind of a response to some of the feedback that I got on my most recent Linux video that went live at the time of recording, which was Linux is easier than Windows. My target, person I'm talking about using Windows would either be your average PC user with no specific niche needs, or, mentioning it as something that you could use for your children or grandparents or something who just need the internet and a word processor, and that's it. Got some interesting responses, and granted, every time I post a video about Linux, all of the fanboys of one side or the other come out of the woodwork as if they're stalking the Linux search on YouTube to respond to every single video they can find and tell everyone why they're wrong. But it brought up some interesting philosophical differences from the people with actual rational communication skills that I thought I'd discuss here today. The big thing that comes up and that people bring up whenever I make videos about Linux is the idea that I still use Windows. And then some people, some very vulgar comments that I instantly deleted and marked as spam, and I'm not going to put you through, but share the idea that, me using Windows for specific tools is not an excuse, because there's perfectly capable tools for X, Y, or Z available on Linux. Because, those are even things I have said. But it doesn't exactly work that way. Again, this is a philosophical kind of discussion. To me, an operating system is basically just an underlying framework or a tool used to allow you to run certain software programs. And the tools that you use are kind of up to you based on your needs. So to me, it doesn't really matter what operating system people use. I just want to educate people on what's available. If you prefer the integrated, closed-off Mac ecosystem, use Apple stuff. If you prefer the do whatever you want, but you got to clean up after yourself, Windows ecosystem of buying software and paying for software and using proprietary tools, use Windows. If you prefer the totally free open source kind of culture, use Linux. Or if you just want something more secure for basic PC users, make them run Linux. Fairly straightforward. But someone like myself, I use multiple tools for the job. I use Windows on my main work computer because that's what I need. I make videos, half of which are about Windows. I'm an educator about technology. Windows is one of the most popular operating systems, so I need to run Windows to make videos about Windows. I've grown up using Windows, so I'm more comfortable there, but I've also used Linux since Windows 95 days, so it doesn't really matter to me. My main reason for sticking with Windows full-time is that I use the Adobe suite for video and audio and graphics production. It's a completely integrated ecosystem across all the applications. It's a very high-end professional level software in which I've developed a super efficient and productive workflow. I can't recreate that on Linux. Adobe doesn't support Linux. None of the other professional tools I use support Linux. And I can't just turn around and use Kdenlive or OpenShot or Lightworks in place of just Premiere. And that's where people get confused. A professional graphics designer who's used Photoshop their entire life but knows how to use GIMP will always tell you that GIMP is not an equivalent tool, that it's not the same tool. It's not as feature-rich, it's not as polished in certain areas, it's much more limiting, and it's just a different tool. A tool for the same job. So if you just need to make basic graphics stuff and you have no specific needs, use GIMP. No reason not to. Just like if you just need to do basic video editing, there's a ton of tools on Linux. Yes. But if you need to do professional daily, multiple videos per day, professional high-level editing with specific tools required and polish, I'm never going to tell that person to go use Kdenlive over Adobe or DaVinci Resolve or Avid. Hell, although Avid is available for Linux if you buy the hardware system itself. And that's where people want to argue about things that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And there's a difference between an alternative to a tool and a replacement. A replacement tool is like, oh, if you're just recording audio, you can use Audacity instead of Adobe Audition and be perfectly fine. That's true, 100% true. If you need to do multi-track recording with complex effects and real-time effects and things like that, and most plugin suites which are only available for Audition and not Audacity anyway, then no, you can't switch to Audacity. It won't work. It's not supported. If you need to edit basic YouTube videos or home movies or something like that, OpenShot, Lightworks, Kdenlive, Cinelera, Blender, there's a ton of options. If I need to do the work I need to do, I need the Adobe suite. Especially since, again, it's all about the ecosystem and the workflow when you're doing high-level professional work in any field. So it's not just Premiere for just basic video editing. It's Premiere tied into After Effects, tied into Audition, tied into Photoshop, all tied into Adobe Media Encoder. There is no replacement on Windows, or on Linux. There's just alternatives. And that's a big confusion people get when it comes to switching to Linux in the first place or trying to find tools. There is alternatives. Linux is an alternative for Windows, but it's not a replacement. It's not a new, it's not a better Windows. It's just a different operating system. A Windows alternative to this tool is not the free version of this tool. It's just a different tool. If you just need to hammer a nail in, any old hammer will work, whether you paid $5 or $50 for it. But if you need a specific kind of hammer for a specific situation, that free hammer you picked up off the street isn't going to work the same. If you need to drill a hole into a wall, a basic hole, a basic drill, and a basic drill bit will work fine. If you need to impact drill into concrete to drill in this specialized bolt, you need a specific tool. That's how this all works. I don't understand why people can't accept this and think that I'm just a Windows fanboy when I do nothing but complain about Windows and make plenty of videos advocating Linux and open source alternatives, because I truly believe that your average user and most people would be better off using that stuff. I'm stuck with Windows because I use specific tools on Windows. The main point I wanted to drive home with this video was that Windows alternatives are not the same, or Linux alternatives to Windows programs, and Linux being an alternative to Windows is not the same as a replacement for those tools or for Windows, as well as there are philosophical reasons for operating system use. Again, when I'm doing video editing in my work, I use Windows. In specific games, I use Windows because that's the tool for the job that I need. Whenever I'm doing day-to-day computer use, I use Linux. When I'm doing serious hardcore, I want zero distractions, I boot up flipping FreeDOS to run WordStar. If I need to render an Apple Motion file, I'm not gonna spend hours trying to figure out some workaround that won't actually work to run Apple Motion on Linux because it doesn't exist. I'm just gonna borrow someone's Mac or send them the file to render for me on Mac. If I'm playing a game on a game console, I'm not gonna laugh about how Linux is better than the PS3's operating system. I don't understand people sometimes, they just drive me nuts, but I wanted to share my thoughts in a more open form. So this has probably been a bit more unedited, the camera angle's probably rough, I just threw the gear up so I could record this video on a new lens, by the way, a 17mm Olympus lens that I picked up from Jonathan over at TLD Today, or Tech Lunch Fest, I don't know, whatever the channel's called, Jonathan. But just wanted to share some thoughts. So hope this provided some clarity potentially into my philosophy and thought process and things like that. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like it, all that jazz. Our sponsor, System76. This isn't a sponsored video, you don't care. If you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, still go check the link in the description or the card icon for my video about Linux being better than Windows, and I will see you next time, I guess. I don't even know.